Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to the second season of The Artist is Storyteller. My name is Amiko Matsuo and I'm art faculty at South Seattle College. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderators today for our conversation with artist Erin Shigaki. Before I introduce Erin, Soperith, and Paul, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement to set our intention and energy before we become immersed in our conversation. So we would like to acknowledge the Artist to Storyteller project, that it is located in West Seattle, the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. Members of our team were born and raised on the traditional lands of the Suquamish, Siklallam, Chumash, and Tongva, Shawnee, and Kickapoo tribes. And we'd like to honor the stewardship of these indigenous peoples whose land and stories we now have the privilege of having been shaped by. We would also like to express our hope that our land acknowledgement and others like it are just a first step, and that land acknowledgements alone do not do a lot for the Native people. So if you live and work in the Seattle area on occupied Duwamish lands, we hope that you will consider giving monthly to Real Rent Duwamish, and that you will attend and support the wonderful events that take place at the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center. You can also take the time to educate yourself on the treaties that impact Native tribes in your area, many of which have not been honored by the United States government. Thank you. So now a little bit about the Artist is Storyteller series. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, the Artist is Storyteller Speaker series was fueled by the desire to put BIPOC artists, performers, and activists directly into conversation with students and the community, and to create a new space for human connection and celebrating creativity in all its forms. And our second season explores the theme of return. So now I'd like to welcome our student moderator, Soperith Yim. Soperith is a Khmer American student currently working towards his BA in elementary education at South Seattle College. He hopes to become a bilingual educator in the future. Soperith enjoys meeting new people and learning about language and culture. And in his free time, he enjoys skateboarding, reading, writing, working out, and watching cooking videos. Hi, Soperith. Our faculty co-moderator is Paul Kikuchi. Paul attended an Ella Fitzgerald concert while in the womb and was born the next day. And he also shares a birthday with Prince. Paul's music is wide-ranging, from drone ambient soundscapes to compositions for traditional Japanese instruments. His music is described as somewhere between natural and deliberate, between wind chimes and the strict order of composition. Paul is a tenured music faculty at South Seattle College, and it is his dream job. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Amiko. Thanks.
And so now I'd like to introduce our wonderful guest artist, Erin Shigaki. Erin Shigaki was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, where she recently returned after many years on the East Coast studying and working in design and art education. Her homecoming has paved the path for public art commissions and grants to create work that is community-based and focused on the experiences of communities of color, often the World War II incarceration of our community. Erin is passionate about highlighting similarities that history, the inhumane detention and family separation immigrants face today, and other systemic violence and injustices Black and Brown people continue to face today. She is keen to explore intergenerational trauma and the emergence of beauty and intimacy despite harsh circumstances. Erin's work also examines the active reclamation of land, language, and culture. She believes that using art to tell stories about these moments can educate, redress wrongs, and incrementally heal. Erin is a community activist and helps run an annual pilgrimage to Minidoka, the American concentration camp where her family was incarcerated. She's also part of Tsuru for Solidarity, a nonviolent direct action project of Japanese American social justice advocates working to end detention and incarceration for all. She is exhibited widely at such places as the Wing Luke Museum, Occidental Park, Nihonmachi Alley, Cornish Playhouse, and the Arts at King Street Station. She was also the 2018 Artist as Resident in Densho or at Densho. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you.
So thank you to all of those joining with us today as audience members. I hope you will feel free to submit any questions or comments you have for Erin. And during the chat, I'll be monitoring that and then get to them during the Q&A section, sort of later at the end of the session. And so and with that now, I'd like to turn it over to Erin, Soperith, and Paul. And I'll be back during the Q&A later. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thanks so much, Amiko. It's really wonderful to be here with you all on this very auspicious day to 2222. Yeah, just wonderful to be here and be in conversation. I've been really looking forward to this event. And so for those of you who are here with us today, some of you might have heard Erin speak at the Day of Remembrance celebration that the Seattle colleges put on several days ago. Celebration is not really the right word, but remembrance. So for those of you who didn't attend or who might not know the history, Erin, I'd love for you to open up by just telling us a little bit about the importance of the Day of Remembrance, especially on this 80th anniversary of Executive Order 9066, and in particular, the importance in the context of your family story and your work. So, and welcome. So glad you're here.
Thanks. So it's the 80th anniversary of the executive order that allowed basically a mass roundup of all people of Japanese ancestry on the West Coast, basically, and that was like 2/3 American citizens. And, it didn't specifically say Japanese. As y'all know, we were at war also with Italy and Germany, but there was no mass incarceration of those groups of people. So it was just a very intentional racist act. And the reason why, we do Day of Remembrance and why this year's so important is because we just keep seeing these cycles coming back where there's just racial and ethnic targeting, and we not only have these gatherings to remember what our people went through, but to give us strength to fight the battles ahead for other people. So that's just a little bit.
Thanks, Erin. Can you tell us just a little bit about who we're seeing here and just a little bit about your family story?
Oh yeah, sure. So these are 3 of my grandparents, and the photos were all taken in Minidoka, which is the southern Idaho concentration camp that most Seattle area people went to. And my grandmother is holding my dad, who was born in that camp, and he was delivered by a horse veterinarian in the absence of a regular doctor. And we know that my grandmother and my dad were very lucky that they survived that kind of poor medical treatment. There are a lot of people who died in childbirth and many other ways. But also, I love these pictures because it shows my family, both sides of my family, in these moments of happiness. My other grandparents met there and got married there, and then they got to leave early and go to work in the Midwest. So the whole experience is kind of about these atrocities counterbalanced with just resilience. We're going to make it. We're going to make it for the next generations. We're going to make it because we've invested so much in this country already. I'll quickly show you. And this is my mom's side of the family too. And this is when they came back to their house in Beacon Hill after the war. And I think it's important to show this image because this incarceration experience didn't end, when they walked out of those gates. Just like it didn't just happen overnight, there were many years of anti-Asian legislation that led up to this happening.
Absolutely. I realized I hadn't really thought much about, I hadn't really pictured people getting married in the camps, right? And do you have any photos or any idea of like what did that look like? What did that ceremony look like? Or was there a ceremony? Or do you have any ideas about how that took place?
No, I don't know. Actually, I had a sense that kind of was there. Oh no, actually, I think they took a portrait later. So maybe it was in Cleveland. So I have a more formal wedding portrait. But yeah, my grandfather, I didn't talk to at all about the experience. And both of my grandmothers did talk to me rather early on, which I didn't know was such a rarity. There's a lot of silence in our community about these stories just because of the shame and pain. But yeah, my grandmother who got married there, no, she didn't share those details with me in those brief conversations. And, I wasn't smart enough to ask her while she was with us, but.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad the thing that I also find so moving about images, still and moving images of of this time period and of the camps is, despite how horrific they are, these like very human moments of joy are captured, and just people living their lives and connecting with one another. And there's one of the archival film clips from the Japanese American National Museum archives is a young girl like ice skating in just this desolate backdrop of the Topaz camp, and it's like it's so heartbreaking, but it's also like beautiful. Like she's out there skating, and it's just such complexity in this experience, right, of our ancestors.
Yeah, you can't get your hands or brain or heart around it all, like a lot of us say, well, because there's 120,000 plus stories, and we just don't know all of them, but I'm trying to investigate as many as possible, or just to give people windows into some of these experiences.
Yeah. Well, that is the perfect segue into the questions Soperith is going to ask you next.
Well, I have one question right before I ask you the second one. During the camps, how was the food like?
Well, apparently it was really, really bad in the beginning, like lots of sickness, just army rations, some like cans of stuff like tinned meat.
It was like pretty much like military type of food.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, how did it get better? Because, we started cooking for ourselves, right? So people who were experienced restaurant cooks or whatever started taking over the kitchens in the different blocks. And
so it's like having everyone try to come together and help each other, whoever's like good at food and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a good detailed question.
Okay, now I'm about to say the actual question. Could you tell us about your path as an artist and activist? Which came first and how are they interconnected?
Oh, sure. Well, I studied graphic design on the East Coast, and I worked in graphic design in New York and Brooklyn for a long time. And then I moved home just a few years ago, like 6 years ago, back to be near my family and back in this like really vibrant, Asian American community that I grew up in. And one of the things that I did was go on this pilgrimage, the Minidoka pilgrimage, with my community. And it was the first time my dad had been back there, since he was a baby there. And it was just really powerful to be on that land, and to be in our community experiencing that range of emotions that I was talking about, right? Just like the joys and the sorrows, all of it. And so then I started to work on the pilgrimage, which I still do. And I just want to say, like, they're not happening in person right now. But when they do, they're open to everyone. It's not, it's not an experience that's closed and only for people who have a direct connection. Because it's an American experience. This camp in particular, there's several of them, it's a national park. It's a we fought to make it recognized. So they're places of education for everybody. Let's see what else I have in the queue here. Yeah, and then I also do activism with some other groups. Amiko mentioned Sudu for Solidarity, and here on the ground in Seattle, we focus a lot of attention on the detention site in Tacoma, which is constantly housing people, not only who are stopped at the border, but people who've lived in the States for years. It's really the same thing. There are no children in that detention site, but it's full of adults. There's like a big sweep of the Cambodian community that's going to be happening. There's a constant tension there in that community. There are Black and brown folks, Eastern European. The food is terrible. The healthcare is terrible. There have been many COVID outbreaks. It's appalling.
It's pretty much like repeating history itself, pretty much. Nothing really new. It's just that, it just come into current years still.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. And so I think this is a way that people have really been able to connect the experiences, right? The black and white poster on the bottom shows a site, I think it's Fort Sill, that like housed Indigenous folks and where Geronimo died. And then it housed Japanese American folks, and then, Latinx folks. So it's like, oh, the United States they're just going to keep recycling even the sites of incarceration. It's sort of like, wow, that's really ballsy. But we'll call it out, and that's what we need to do. Like they'll go ahead and do these things without thought for the pain of that legacy.
Thanks, Erin. I know you were just attended the protest for the Day of Remembrance that was at the detention center that happens every year on the Day of Remembrance. Would you mind just filling in our audience, like, what is that event like? What's it all about?
Oh yeah, sure. We've been doing it there for a few years. And we are joined, the main group that does work there is La Resistencia, and I have their URL there on the page. And basically, we bring our taiko drums and make a lot of noise because we know the folks inside can hear us. Sometimes we hear from detained people, like we're able to like hook them up to a cell phone. Sometimes we just hear from relatives of folks who are detained, to really get a full picture of what's going on in there. And we just show each other our faces, and show each other the solidarity that that needs to happen to take down these structures, honestly.
Yeah, it's very moving. So those who are in the Seattle area, definitely recommend attending that event in future years if you can. And what's the easiest way to find out about that, Erin? Is it on the Sudo for Solidarity website? Probably the best way to.
Yeah, Sudo, and the Instagram page is pretty active. Resistencia's Instagram is very active too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great. Resistencia is, I think they're running something there at least once a month, if not more. They're very dedicated to the families and the people that are detained there, and it's really important work.
Yeah. We'll have those links on the Artist as Storyteller website too, for those who are watching this and want to find those links. So I want to actually ask you a question that's related to our theme this year, which is the word return. And I think that when the Artist as Storyteller team was thinking about the theme this year, we were really thinking about COVID, right? And the isolation that has come from the pandemic the last couple of years, and thinking about what it means to return from this time we've been in, this very unprecedented time we've been in, right? But honestly, as I have been preparing for this event and exploring your work and our conversations and my conversations with Amiko and Soperith, there's just so many layers of this idea of return, of ways to look at it, ways to, Soperith, you were just saying about, well, basically we're just repeating history, aren't we? Like we're returning, right, to these things that we've done in the past. And so I think, instead of like trying to guide this too much to start off with, Erin, I'd just like to let you start us off with like, what does this word return evoke for you in the context of your life or your work or your art or activism? Like, let's start there and see where it leads.
Oh, sure. And you two can feel free to popcorn in. It's so rich, like I think about a return to culture, the culture that our families weren't allowed to, or felt like they weren't allowed to continue to teach and celebrate, including language and traditions, because they were jailed for being of Japanese descent, and I know that's the same for you, Soperith, right? With the genocide, there's so much lost there in culture. And I think about, as I mentioned, returning to those sacred sites of shame, returning home, like you saw that picture of my relatives. I think about like the return of the land to the indigenous caretakers. Like, let's go all the way back to that moment. And then something I've been thinking a lot about is that return can mean reparations. Our community fought really hard in the 70s and into the 80s to get an apology and redress from the government, and we succeeded. I'm gonna try to give us another image. And I feel so strongly that is just a perfect blueprint for Black reparations, and it's not about, it's about the symbolism of the money, and it's deeply about the apology. I'm just going to go ahead and read a Ta-Nehisi Coates quote because he says it the best. For Americans, the hardest part of paying reparations would not be the outlay of money. It would be acknowledging that their most cherished myth was not real. And then he also says, what I'm talking about is more than recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal. You know, what about the spirit of our country? I don't, like, I love being American, but like, please don't make me like blah, 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 all these things that we're just not gonna hold to. The constitutional values, the civil liberties. So I'm just showing you here some images of a BLM mural that my buddy Scott McCall and I put up in the old Japantown neighborhood to just really try to offer a small piece of healing to the Black community during the uprising and beyond. Most of the mural is still up, and I'm really glad of that.
This is down on, is it Main Street or Jackson? It's on Jackson. Yeah. You know, Erin, I'm so glad you're speaking about this. And I think in one of our conversations recently, I shared with you, remembering that redress movement and remembering my grandparents getting the check. I remember it mostly because they gave my brother and I both $500, and I was able to go buy an acoustic guitar with it. And if you really think about people losing those years and the amount of cumulative wealth that was lost in the Japanese American community, like that can never be repaid. Like the $20,000 that the government gave could never repay that. But the acknowledgement of how wrong it was and the recognition, the apology is what was so important in that process.
Mm-hmm. I know that racism has done a number on all of us, right? It's in us. Like our country was built on it, and the way that it holds us apart is going to keep these supremacist structures standing. There's got to be a way that we relate to each other's stories. It's so crystal clear to me, the links between just the obsession with incarcerating our bodies, and relying on our labor, and then when we get too successful, let's take them out.
Yeah.
Do you view art as a way to deal with and heal from trauma, in particular for immigrants and communities of color?
Yes, that's a great question. I do, and that's one of the approaches I've taken in my art career. Because I when I first started making work, I was focusing on images, of the incarceration, to talk about these tender moments, right? Like these kids are being rounded up too, and it seems to take such images to pull at the emotions of people, right? Somehow we need to see these young, scared faces. So, and then I realized like my own anger and pain about this on behalf of my family. And then when I, started putting these walls up, I used that image that we just saw by Dorothea Lange to do my first mural at Densho. Like I just heard from my community how grateful they were that there's this big, bold statement, on this busy public street in the central area, And, I mean, I guess I could have known that we had a lot of healing to do, but becoming a public artist who is working with these stories, people have really told me, like, thank you. This is so important to me, and my ancestors. So.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, and when Soperith and I were talking about this question and like art as healing, but also just trauma and generational trauma, um, Soperith, you were sharing with me a lot about what you see in your community and kind of the experience of immigration and of assimilation or of the challenge of assimilation, right? Um, and I was wondering, Soperith, if you wanted to talk a little bit just about what you see in the Khmer community and around that.
I feel like the Khmer community is really divided right now. Like there's a lot of, you know, um, taking sides. Everyone's kind of blaming each other and not really taking a lot of responsibility. Even in my country, in Cambodia right now, like right now they're just selling their land to foreigners and stuff. They're not helping our own community. They're doing a lot of things that are not, empowering and bringing us together. And even right now, I feel like in the Khmer community, though, like there's definitely a lot of hate still going on between Khmer people and other Khmer people. But also, they're looking at foreigners, like different too. Like it's just a lot of like hatred. And I feel like it really stems from the culture, from the genocide. And I just lost my best friend, like from on the 17th.
Sorry.
And I feel like talking about this, like learning about you guys' culture and stuff, like he would probably want to be interested to actually like learn about it too. He loves talking about history and stuff though. But he suffered from alcoholism. I was always drinking him with him and stuff though, but his I feel like his family, not being educated and stuff and growing up, in urban areas like in Seattle and stuff, like it really affected him. And then like he had a hard time trusting people, including his own family, his own mom and stuff. So him passing away though, I just feel like I just try to do better and stuff, and then try to make him more proud and try to stay away from the street stuff and all that. But
Thanks for sharing
also,
that with us.
yeah, but also, you know, I just try to learn from other people's culture and languages and stuff, because I feel like the more that we know about other people's culture, the more that we have respect for them. And you don't have the tunnel vision as much, but also you have to be going through like a spiritual battle to really like understand yourself before you're able to actually accept that type of um, fact and evidence and stuff.
Yeah, and the thing that jumped out at me about what you just shared with us, Sapirith, is the effects of a huge traumatic event like the genocide. Oh yeah, that's going to reverberate down to you and to your late friend, right? Fear and distrust, totally. Like that runs through me and Paul's community too. Like, and yeah, it goes through the blood, because it's the way that our parents and grandparents carried themselves, after these events, if they made it, right? It's very real.
Yeah, it definitely has a huge impact in our community and stuff. And even if kids don't know about it and stuff, it really runs through their DNA. Like, for some reason, there might be something that agitates them for some reason, and they might not even know why. But yeah.
Well, so Pirith, so sorry for the loss of your friend, and I was wondering, maybe right now we could just take a really short little moment of silence for in your friend's memory together. And thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. Feel free to drop any questions you might have for Erin in the chat. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amiko to field those questions and to ask a couple follow-up questions as well, layering on some of the things we've already talked about.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. And yeah, I look forward to seeing those questions, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to be a little bit selfish with my own questions. So I think I'd like to start with just hearing a little bit more about how you approach your art making. I think that's where I'd like to start. And in particular, I had a question about if you, Erin, have a difference in how you're approaching your work of art, like that, the work that you intend to display in the street, you know, for example, with the BLM Solidarity mural that you created, versus something that you're preparing for the Wing Luke Museum, and just maybe if there are differences in how you approach your art making, and also maybe in terms of the reception to your work too. Yeah, if you could share that with us, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, I've only done graphic design work that's sort of inside, you know, a space, a cultural space. And, you know, I'm glad I have those skills, but I wasn't satisfied enough with the kinds of choices I could make in driving my own messaging. And so, you know, when I took this really great public art boot camp course that the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture offers, if anyone is ever interested in that, it's amazing. It changed my life. And it just made it clear to me, like, you know, they were talking about, first of all, I didn't even know like that a social practice was a thing, right? Oh, you're categorized, you can be categorized as an artist who, you know, makes work about social issues. And I was like, oh, well, that's me. That's what I want to do. And, you know, I know what stories are closest to my heart. And so sort of like I was talking about, I just started from that place, you know, the tightness of my family story, growing out a little bit further into the community. And that's just my North Star, is telling that story, especially as I figured out more and more how it connects to other stories, you know, of communities of color in this country. So I have a pretty a pretty clear lens on it, I feel. And I don't think I have any weird ego issues about, you know, like exhibiting in a New York museum or something. I mean, I just feel like I'm kind of an art historian activist, and that's my lane, you know, and a brick wall is the easiest place to go. So.
Yeah, and I think part of my question then connects to some of how you seem to embrace some of the unexpected parts of working in that manner, right? Um, uh, One of the questions that we had prepared has to do with how your work was publicly vandalized, for instance, and sometimes how that comes from the censorship that happens from people in positions of power, and sometimes we just can't tell how that's going to unfold. And so those stories end up becoming part of your artwork too. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit about that, maybe in general, just how you embrace unexpected aspects of producing work, and also how you've responded to that.
Yeah, sure. You know, after that first mural that I showed you of the two kids, after that one, I was like, all right, I'm going to put a historic panel up every time I put one of these walls up, because people need context, you know? And so it was one of those historic panels that got literally whited out on the Bellevue College campus by an administrator. And I was like, what? Our history that has been whitewashed was whitewashed? I just couldn't believe it. I was like, are you serious? Are you handing me this opportunity to like be loud? They were trying to shut me up, but I was like, oh man, this is too perfect, honestly. And I joke about it now, but it was terrible. That was a really terrible period in my life. Full of just like feeling that intergenerational trauma, like, oh, this white guy and his money is more important than my whole effing community that got locked up. That's what you're telling me. Thanks. Thanks a lot, and how to grapple with that. But luckily, I have my whole community and also the allies at Bellevue College. We really rallied and we did our thing. We had our own healing ceremony and people lost their jobs and there was media. It's a very delicate time in this country. Like, people give so much power to the wealthy. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also thinking about how, so when that happens, you said that, like, we need to present more of this work in different contexts so that we can continue to share the story. But I also noticed that you work with different media as well. So like sometimes they are murals, sometimes they are meant to be temporary installations. All these different materials that you use in your work, they also, to me, seem to tell a story, and it's part of your story that you're sharing with us. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about that, and also, if time permits, just a few more images.
Well, here's another early piece, and these are Emma or Shinto temple tablets, I guess, that you'll find in Japan at every temple, and you usually write a wish on them. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to make these tablets and I'm going to also like bring them to the community and have them help me make this piece. Like, what a better thing to do, than to have this whole wave of positive wishes go on to a piece that ended up it was out there for over a year in Occidental Park. So I think that's been really fun. And I, I don't really draw. So I was, you've seen me work with those photographs. And then I was like, okay, I want to do, this really sturdy outdoor installation, but like, what things can I manage myself? And so, my partner helped me cut these pieces of wood, but everything else was done by hand. And I just had to go and find this extremely heavy red rope somewhere random in the Midwest. But I think it turned out pretty good. I don't think I have any other shots of that. And then I did sort of a larger version of it during the pandemic where I collected quotes. This was up in the North End. And by the way, this is like a statement that I've been using a lot that came from an essay that my friend Nina Wallace wrote for Densho. And she asked that question that has just resonated with me since the moment I read it, just ask yourself, what do you want to leave behind? Like what legacy are we going to leave here? And I'm not a person with children, so like I'm not going to have literal prodigy, but I want to do as much as I can to tear down these systems that have hurt us.
Thank you so much for that. I'm wondering if just to follow up with this, if you could share with us any current projects that that you could share with us as well, in addition to what you've just shown us.
Well, I have a couple of murals in the works. One going into the CMAR Museum, which, if you don't know it, is this really beautiful space. It's pretty new, and I think they opened right before the pandemic. It's in South Park, and it's about the Chicano-Chicana experience. And I'm doing kind of a Japanese American and Chicano-Chicana solidarity mural there. I'm working with a couple different Japanese American muralists, Kenji Hamai and Mari Shibuya, to do different projects. I have been trying to do more ceramic work, just because it's nice to be, in there with the hands and messy, and having a full tactile experience, as you know, Amiko. So trying to figure that out. I have a ceramics sensei, luckily, who's helping me through this process.
Erin, as far as like experiencing your works out in the wild, can you give us a few points that we can go in Seattle to see your work, like your wheat-based mural work?
Yeah, so where that In Solidarity Black Lives Matter mural is that I mentioned, there's a few different projects right there in what we call Nihon Machi Alley. So that's roughly Jackson and 6th, I think. A few pieces are there. And then I finished a big piece in the U District. I think it's the Ave between 42nd and 43rd. And it's supposed to be permanent, like as long as it lasts, it's sealed. A big mural about the University of Washington, Japanese American students who had to leave campus when the war broke out. And also, about this recurring moment of anti-Asian xenophobia. So I thought that would be a good message to bring to that community of a lot of young folks.
Great. And then the Densho mural is still up as well, correct?
The Densho mural fell down. I understand that it's still up at Bellevue College.
Okay.
Yeah, I think someone's been maintaining it there, which is really nice. I haven't been back there. Maybe we need to
return.
Return.
Great.
Well, I think like we could keep talking for a long time, but yeah, unfortunately, I'm thinking it might be a good stopping point for today, and then I think we would all love some time to continue reflecting on some of the things that you shared with us. It was so wonderful to have you in this space and to have this very salient conversation with you about. For me, like what's resonating is so much about what you spoke about, the redress and reparations, but also I also just want to like echo what you were saying about like this hope for spiritual renewal, and I want to hold on to those things after this conversation. So thank you so much. For the audience, I should say that you can connect with Erin and her work through the website purplegatedesigns.com. No S, sorry, purplegatedesign.com. And this is a great way to continue seeing some of the work, but also following her work on social media. Instagram is what we were talking about earlier. So that's a great way to connect with the work. But then also we'll make those links available, like we talked about with the La Resistencia and some other works that we were talking about today. So please continue to follow the work. I do want to also mention that we will be continuing conversations about the theme of return in March. And on March 8th, I will, at 1 o'clock, I will have the opportunity to share and be joined in a conversation with Ken and Julia Yonetani from Kyoto, Japan. This talk will be co-moderated with Justin Justy from University of Washington. So I'm looking forward to that. So please visit our website for the links for future work, future artist and storyteller work, and also Erin's work, of course, and to catch up on some of the past conversations, if you'd like, from the last season. This recording from today will also be available, as well as the rest of our entire series, at our website at artistsandstorytellers.com. So thank you all so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you again.
Thanks for joining us.